I haven't really done any deep research trying to find who really the smartest Elden Ring fan is. It could be only waifu for all I know, but from what I have seen it appears to be Greg Glinstone, and we are going to analyze his The Psychology of Gamer Rage video, see how correct he is and try to improve it if possible. So he starts his video by showing a bunch of streamers who are dying a lot and they are raging and complaining, and then he asks the question, why mad though? In his video he is going to analyze and explain the possibilities of why people get mad at video games. When it comes to me personally, asking me why am I mad when I'm playing these games is the same as spitting someone in their face and then asking them why they are mad, and that makes sense on a surface level, but it's nice to analyze the entire psychology of what is happening and why.
It unstunned itself! It actually unstunned itself!
Molding, tilt, gamer rage, all different words for the same thing. What is it that makes us rage? What is it that makes some people rage more than others? Why you mad though? Like, really? I mean that question seriously. Why? Why does Elden Ring drive us crazy? What are the psychological processes that contribute to frustration, and what can we do about it? This video is about challenges and how we as humans respond to them. I'm going to talk about this concept using the Elden Ring DLC as an example, but for the most part these ideas can be applied to any video games that make you frustrated. I'm not only going to analyze some of the factors that I think contribute to frustration, but also offer some advice about how you might be able to deal with it. This is a video about difficulty and the different ways that we can perceive and respond to it. It's also about the discourse around the difficulty in these games and why I think it's not particularly constructive. Now, to prepare you, I'm going to go through some popular ideas that float around the community that you've probably heard before and maybe you agree with, that I would consider examples of an unhelpful mindset. Poor mental game. I'm not coming after anyone. You are valid in feeling the way that you do. I'm not saying that you're wrong for reacting in a certain way. I am going to analyze some theories of where this frustration can come from, talk about the psychological processes that contribute to it, and go through some more productive ways that you can deal with it healthily. If you're new to the channel, that's not surprising. This is a new channel. I'm Greg Glinstone, I play a lot of Elden Ring, and I do challenge runs. Obviously, because I like to make things unnecessarily hard for myself when I play these kinds of games, I have a certain bias on the subject of difficulty. I like a challenge. I like this. Also this. I like this. This is fun for me.
One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong.
For me, just because something is extremely difficult, it doesn't mean it's necessarily too difficult, because I want it to be difficult.
Alright, so he likes challenges, that's pretty cool, that's very relatable, I like challenges as well. Let's see how much we can understand each other and how much we can agree.
That being said, when I play my friend in Mario Kart and they beat me every time, that for me is too difficult, because I have no hope of winning. Mario Kart, for me, in that context, is a more difficult game than Elden Ring.
So what you find difficult is not the game Mario Kart itself, it's just playing against your friend who is apparently insanely good at the game. I don't know how he manages to win every time in a game where luck plays such a huge role, but whatever.
Instead of measuring stress by the amount of stresses in an individual's life, we should be measuring the individual's level of perceived stress. Perceived stress is the measure of not only our perception of the amount of stress in our lives, but also our own ability to deal with those stresses. It factors in resilience, self-esteem, and the perceived level of control over our own lives, our mastery. And these factors are attributed both to your genetics and environmental influences, like your upbringing and the culture you were raised in. Meaning that studies have shown that many of the processes involved in how you perceive stress have been formed in your brain, way back before your birth or in your early childhood. It is who you are. Importantly, these are unconscious processes.
Okay, so how someone reacts to stress can differ based on genetics. For example, someone who has the brain of a vegetable obviously is not going to show any reaction to pretty much anything, or someone who has very low intelligence and is being constantly tricked is going to have a very hard time coming in terms with the fact that they are the plaything of people smarter than them. They might need something to help them calm down, something to help them cope, and sometimes that can be something harmful like drugs. And when it comes to the environment of someone grew up, an example would be someone who is very rich and doesn't have to ever work and never had to worry about anything, never stress about anything, might find it way easier to deal with their time being wasted, since they just have so much more free time to waste if they have really nothing going on. And on the opposite, someone who is really poor or very busy might not want to tolerate even the tiniest amount of their time being wasted and might have a very aggressive reaction. That's more of a bigger generalization than video games, but those examples can definitely apply to video games as well.
I'd suggest that perceived difficulty in video games is similar, and it has less to do with player skill than most people assume, which is why when someone is really struggling with a game, it's usually not a good idea to just tell them to get good. You've probably experienced a situation where you're playing a game or even doing something in your daily life, and you're with someone and they just shrug their shoulders after a while and say, well, it's impossible. You'd know if you've been around this that it doesn't really help to say, you're just not trying hard enough. It doesn't really matter if that statement is true or not, because at that moment, it's very difficult for them to feel like the situation is in their control, and they will get defensive. It's natural.
Well, it's really bold of you to assume that the reason they are saying get good is because they actually expect anyone to get good, especially when someone is frustrated and it's very clear to them. That actually makes them spam that kind of nonsense even more and add extra bullshit to it as well. Like, you bad cause you are mad, you suck at it so bad, you suck absolute dig, you are absolutely trash. All that crap is just trash talk, and for many reasons. One of the reasons can be watching someone get mad and seethe is part of their entertainment. They just want to laugh at someone's misfortunes or negative reactions. There is a reason people like PewDiePie got really famous really fast, because the children that were watching him liked his reactions of shouting like a bitch when he was pretending to get scared by low budget shitty horror games. Same reason people want to see streamers play crappy frustrating games like Getting Over It and I Wanna Be the Bossy. It's not a matter of the game's quality, it's a matter of how much entertainment they will get out of the streamer's reactions. Another reason can be ego. Looking down on others can give you a sense of superiority. Another reason is bullying. Bullying usually happens by miserable people who want to make someone more miserable than them so they can forget about their own misery, and it also gives them a sense of power, a sense of control, by feeling how much they can impact and ruin someone else. They feel like they are not at the bottom anymore because they found someone who is even below, and by continuously bullying they are trying to ensure the victim stays beneath them so they won't have to feel like they are the lowest of the low. And of course, when they can't actually ruin someone's life, they have to imagine that they actually are ruining lives. They want to imagine that their words on the internet are so impactful that they can ruin the entire psyche of someone and make them depressed and miserable. Other times they say get good because they want to deflect criticism and they are projecting their own thoughts to others, meaning they themselves were complaining when they were losing, and once they won, the game is suddenly good again. Asmongold is a perfect example of that, and I have a video on it. You are underestimating the stupidity of the people who spam the get good and skill issue nonsense because you actually don't get to hear it. You love these games and you keep playing them and beating them to the point that you are considered one of the best players. They have no reason to tell you that kind of crap.
This is why two people encountering a challenge at the same skill level might react in completely different ways. This isn't a judgment on their character, this isn't a flaw in their personality, and importantly, it's not a skill issue. Ego is often brought up in relation to this difference of experience, as well as the assumption that someone is frustrated because they have been ego-checked. This is often interpreted as an insult, but it's important to understand that a person who is more competitive or more easily frustrated isn't necessarily a more egotistic person. They might be, but that's not what ego means in a psychological context. Ego is a concept from Freud, which is nothing more than a word that is used in psychology to denote the rational self. It is what makes you, you. Having an ego doesn't mean that you think more highly of yourself than you do of others. Everyone has an ego. Everyone has a self.
Yes, having an ego is very normal, and just like everyone has a self, everyone has an ego, with a tiny exception of people who actually don't even have a self. People who just sit in a room with literally nothing going on in their lives can't have much of an ego since they don't have much of a self. These kinds of people many times can artificially try to create an ego by making up stuff, fantasies, and essentially creating a fake self. In that case, the ego is not real, just like the self is not real, which is why the ego is inflated in that case. In their own little minds, they think they are cool or accomplished or special, but in reality, they are just nobodies who kept stroking themselves long enough to forget that. That can be the case for both the player who makes up excuses for losing at the game and the people who are constantly spamming get good skill issue and stuff like that. These kinds of people get very defensive when faced with a reality check because it removes them from the fantasy world in their heads and brings them back to reality. But of course, a reality check is very healthy because you get to see how the world around you perceives you, and that gives extra information to know and understand yourself better, because you are not just who you want to be, you are also part of the world which works under certain rules. You can't just imagine yourself being a bird, jump off a cliff and fly. You built an airplane or helicopter instead by understanding both yourself and the world.
Everyone deals with frustration in some regard, but different people have different thresholds of when that frustration becomes too much, and they have less perceived control in dealing with it. While self-esteem can contribute to that, it's not the sole contributing factor. Getting frustrated in a video game is not necessarily the result of arrogance. It's also not a skill issue. Mad is not 'cause bad. It's more likely that mad 'cause game hard. But even putting the game aside, mad may be 'cause life hard. It could be they're going through a tough time. Maybe they've just not had enough water today, or enough sleep, or they're just a little hungry. There are an infinite number of possible reasons to explain why you're mad though.
Exactly, there can be tons of reasons that lead someone to being frustrated. If you got fired from your job, your pet died, your car crashed, your partner cheated on you, you lost your wallet, you found out you have cancer, you are already dealing with so much, you are almost at the point of breaking, even if you are a super well composed person. And at that point, the day is already ending and you decide to sit there and have some fun playing PvP in a game you loved, like Elden Ring. And most of the times you played PvP before, they were fun, the players were good sports, honorable people, but you end up this time playing with cheaters that not only they destroyed you easily, they deleted your save file and they send you a message telling you they hope you die from cancer. You might not take it that well. At that very moment you might explode and decide not only to start flaming them really hard, but actually hunt them down and ruin their lives, even though they didn't really do anything to you compared to all the things you actually had to deal with. But it was the last straw, and at that point point you already decided to discard your humanity and embrace the demon inside you. Whether you come to regret it afterwards or not is a different issue. The fact remains that you would not have acted that way if there wasn't a chain reaction of all these circumstances.
But let's speak more generally. What is frustration? What mad, though? One common theory that you may have heard before is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance in psychology is a theory that suggests frustration is related to the discomfort of having two conflicting thoughts, beliefs, or behaviors. Using Elden Ring as an example, let's say the conflict is the belief that I am good at this video game and other games in this series. Again, I don't mean this in an egotistic sense. I don't mean I'm the best. I just mean I feel confident that this challenge is achievable. So this belief conflicts with the behavior of I just died to this boss 20 times in a row. These two clashing things create a feeling of unease that manifests as frustration because our brain can't reconcile the conflict. So that's what mad. This unpleasant feeling combines from a conflict of beliefs and behavior in your brain. You have the belief that you can do this, but your behavior is showing you that you can't, at least not yet.
Alright, that's a good example of cognitive dissonance, which is essentially either having two contradictory beliefs and your brain is having a hard time processing how the hell did you manage to simultaneously believe both of these things without questioning yourself before, and now you are questioning yourself which one of the two is actually real or which one you are willing to keep if you want to choose truth or if you want to choose a lie that might be more digestible. So you are in an inner conflict because your worldview is being shattered by realizing that these two thoughts were contradicting each other. And another way of getting your worldview shattered is by having your one view proven wrong by the reality in front of you. You can still choose to ignore it, pretend you don't see it, start thinking of something else, try to forget it, essentially being in denial. In this case, it would be the belief of being good at the game because you got a confidence boost by beating a boss fight that almost everyone else had tons of trouble with, and after beating it, you got tons of praise telling you how great you are. If you let that get into your head, you are in for a bad wake-up call, because the fact is that you actually lack data. You don't really know why the others had so much trouble with that boss, you don't know what kind of builds they were playing, you don't know how the boss behaved when it was fighting them, you don't know if some kind of weird glitch happened in your case and the boss gave you some free hits, you don't know any of that, but you decided to roll with the belief that you are good at the game because you wanted to feel good, you wanted to feel happy, you wanted to feel accepted, validated, praised, superior, and so you decided to blindly embrace a potential massive lie. And of course that lie is not going to last forever. In fact, it's not going to last long because you are still playing the game and you will be tested soon in the next boss fight. And once you do get tested, the game can make you realize really fast that not only weren't you one of the best, but you are actually now dying more than the average person. And now your ego is going to come crashing down from the high horse it was riding before. It's a pretty simple and understandable concept. And it's also a mistake that can happen to anyone. Not everyone tries to keep their ego at check all the time. And now he is going to show us a few options of how to deal with it.
Again, these are unconscious processes that we are not aware of, and these feelings are illogical. You can't talk someone out of these feelings easily. So, how do we deal with it? There are four main ways that we commonly deal with the unpleasantness of cognitive dissonance. 1. I change my behavior, or I change my belief. 2. I justify the behavior by adding new beliefs. 3. I can outright deny the conflict between my belief and my behavior. Or 4. I justify the behavior by changing my perception of the belief. Each strategy has its own advantages and disadvantages, and we may naturally have a particular inclination to deal with our cognitive dissonance in a certain way. So let's examine these strategies in more detail. So, if my belief is that I'm good, and my behavior is that I've died 20 times to this boss, one way I can opt to change my behavior in this example is to just keep fighting the boss mindlessly until I don't die. So, instead of 20 times, it's 21, then 22, then 30, 50, etc. This is often the option I default to. No thoughts, head empty, I'm not really doing anything to address the cognitive dissonance in my head. I'm just continuing to bang my head against that wall without consciously making any changes. And using this process actually isn't a bad option to start with. You may have heard the term conditioning in the context of fighting games, which is when you make another player respond to you in a certain way by making them feel like it's safe, only to punish it at a crucial moment. This term comes from the psychological concept of operant conditioning. One explanation for the manipulation of behavior through operant conditioning is Thorndike's law of effect, which is that if behavior is followed by something pleasant, we are more likely to repeat it. If behavior is followed by something unpleasant, we are less likely to repeat it. When learning a boss, you can switch your brain off and just allow your muscle memory to be conditioned into responding to moves in a certain way. This is a process I describe in my Mind Over Morgoth video, which you can check out here if you want. In that video I explain my process of learning a boss, and I'd recommend it to anyone having trouble keeping a cool head. Eventually, muscle memory will allow you to dodge and punish at appropriate times from sheer trial and error. The trade-off is that sometimes Elden Ring bosses are assholes. They know what you want to do and they are conditioning you in much the same way. Margit teaches you that if you play Elden Ring like Dark Souls, you're gonna have a bad time. He will do a massive attack that a Dark Souls veteran will immediately see as an opportunity to get some R1 spam in. But it's not safe. What you learn eventually is that what you're supposed to do is attack during the delayed attack and in between combos as well as after. So, while conditioning is helpful early on to develop muscle memory, you can be trapped and put in situations that you feel are unfair, because they are. Elden Ring bosses know that you have played Dark Souls. They know that you have been conditioned to play a certain way. They're self-aware. It's something you need to prepare for.
So the first way of dealing with it is try to gradually accept the fact that you are not as good as you thought you are, calm down and start learning all the boss's moves as if you are playing for the first time again, as if you are a noob who needs all the data analysis he needs to be able to beat the boss. So you try not to focus too much on the fact that your ego is now getting shattered, you just focus on winning and accepting as many deaths as it takes. And the bigger lesson here is that you should not repeat the same mistake of inflating your ego, because even though it felt temporarily good, that sense of being better than most and getting praised and all, once it all came crashing down, it felt like absolute shit and you don't want to feel like that ever again. So you keep your ego at check from now on, and you keep trying to brute force the bosses through trial and error, regardless of how many tries it takes, instead of trying to outskill them really fast, as if that's even possible. And you also ignore all the stupid children in the chat telling you that they beat this boss very easily and way faster, because all they are trying to do is get all the positive feeling from having an inflated ego without any risk of the negative feelings, since they themselves are not streaming. They are not really trying to show you the reality of what they are or what they did. They don't mind lying to get that feeling of superiority, because it's really that sweet to them. But you as a streamer, you have the responsibility of showing them what exactly is going on, and on the positive side, you are getting paid for it.
The other option in changing your behavior is just to stop trying. This is often the tactic used when you hear people say things like, "It's not that the boss is difficult, it's that it's boring." They're not interested in continuing fighting because they're not getting the desired result with the time or energy that they want to invest. There's nothing wrong with coming to that conclusion, but there are lots of contributing factors. I completely empathize with how mentally taxing it can be to learn a difficult boss. It is exhausting to memorize a moveset, especially when you do it on a challenge run and you have such a low margin of error. This isn't a game where you can come home at the end of a day and relax with a bit of a video game. You have to study these bosses. But that is the game. That's always been the game. To rectify this, if you do get to a point where the process of learning a boss is feeling exhausting, then it's a good idea to have a long break and come back to it fresh when the thought of studying a boss becomes less daunting. Sometimes that's all you need to go from an intensely negative experience to a positive one. Breaks are really, really important. You don't want to burn out. One huge contributing factor in the perception of difficulty and stress is time. If you're asked to do something simple, like doing the dishes, that task is going to go from simple to incredibly difficult if I tell you that you need to do it in world record time. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You get a new game and you're excited to explore and get into it, but you have this thing in the back of your head and it's telling you, ooh, you better stay away from social media for a little while, you don't want to get spoiled. And now you're in a weird position. Do you race through the game so that you can go on YouTube and join the discussion? Or do you go without social media for potentially weeks to play the game at your own pace? I'm terrible at avoiding social media, and I spend a lot of time on YouTube. So if, like me, you were on YouTube within the first few days of the Elden Ring DLC, it wouldn't have taken long before all the bosses of the game were completely spoiled for you in thumbnails. It sucks, but that's the deal. It's a race to finish the game before the surprises are all over the internet. And that time pressure turns a boss that takes an hour to defeat from a fun challenge to a frustrating slog because the stakes are so much higher. You actually have something to lose. It's the same thing when you're talking with friends and they say, "Oh, are you up to pox-ridden Dabney?" And you have to squirm around the question because you had 1 hour of game time tonight and you spent all of it dying to the death bird in Charo's hidden grave. You have absolutely no idea who pox-ridden Dabney is, and now you're mad at them for spoiling it for you. But you don't want them to know that because you don't want them to know you spent an hour dying to the damn death bird. Think of the poor streamers who decided that it was a great idea to lock themselves in their room until they finish it. Terrible idea. This game is huge. This isn't a game that's designed to be beaten in a weekend. Not that it's not possible, it's just going to be exponentially more difficult and infinitely more frustrating than if you chipped away at it over a month. Especially when you're being filmed live and there's chat telling you to get good and there's a death counter counting up and up and up. Now when I tell you that Mesmer at level 1 took me around 15 hours, it would be reasonable to assume that I'm a no-life weirdo that hasn't seen the sun since the game's release. But I didn't do those 15 hours in a single day. I did it over the span of a couple weeks. You don't need to binge the game. I don't think it's designed to be played like that. It's too big. There's too much stuff, and it's really challenging. You need to take your time with it. This is the reason why a person who spends 5 hours on a boss may actually feel they had an easier time than someone who spent 1 hour. It's a feeling of a lack of control. Suddenly, it's not that the fight is difficult, it's that the fight is a coin flip. It's random, it's unfair. I'm not able to influence the game in the way I want. I can't win on my terms, I'm being cheated. And it's this feeling that causes the person to do the very common thing of throwing their hands up and saying, fuck it, I'm summoning the Mimic tier. Now, no judgment if you use the Mimic tier. I'm not coming for you if you like to summon. I'm talking to the people that don't want to summon but feel like they have to. You don't have to. You just need to put in more time. You may not want to put in more time. That's fine. But that is the requirement to avoid using tools to get you through faster. So, we've talked about changing your behavior. What about changing your belief? Well, in this example, your belief is that you are good at this game. Changing your belief means relenting completely and accepting the fact that you are actually not good at this game. You retire in shame. That's not ideal. Anyone can do this with enough perseverance. A goldfish beat the final boss of the DLC. Not an exaggeration. Check the link in the description. Do try to push yourself beyond your limits and accept that these fights are made to be difficult. They will take time and energy. If you have died to a boss for over an hour, that doesn't mean that you can't do it. These bosses are supposed to be hard. Allow them to be. But at the same time, it is completely reasonable and honorable to accept your own limitations.
So the other option, which is quitting, is more like my kind of option. If it wasn't for having a YouTube channel and doing an analysis on the genre, I would just quit the game after realizing that it's boring. Actually, I don't think I would even buy another Souls game after having played Dark Souls 1 back in the time and realizing how stupid and insane the fandom is. But the reason of quitting in this case is kind of different than mine, because he says people quit because they don't get the result they want. Essentially what he means is they are not winning and they can't stand losing for so long. The problem with my case is that the result I want does not even exist in the game. There is no point for me to continue at all. It doesn't matter how many times I die, it doesn't matter how fast I'm going to win, it doesn't matter what tools I'm going to use, what gear, class, anything. The one very thing I was promised when I started playing these games was challenge, and there is no challenge to be found anywhere. Making me memorize animations is not challenging. We have been doing that since elementary school. All the special effects and visuals are not enough to trick my brain into thinking this is some kind of epic boss fight. By growing up and maturing, you learn to not be so shallow and look deeper into things, and once you do, there really isn't much to be found. If your school was forcing you to just memorize stuff in the books and repeat them to the teacher like a parrot just so you can get good grades, instead of making you understand the topics that you are supposed to be learning and why they are the way they are and how they are used in a practical way outside of theory, it means that the education system of your country is garbage. And if you were a smart child, you would realize that they are not actually educating you, they are just creating mindless drones who are just repeating a narrative. So even as a child, you would get sick of memorizing just for the sake of memorizing, and you would prefer to do something that's actually stimulating, something that's actually educational and will help you do something instead of just blindly follow orders. Which is why developing social skills, making friends, flirting, playing games, whether it's mind games or physical games, are all considered more important than participating in whatever shit the school wants to fill in your head, because the things that you actually understand clearly and put in practice become part of you, and they keep developing with you as you keep growing, while listening to the teachers all the time would make you a zombified, socially awkward turbo virgin with no personality. Of course, there is a balance you can keep between doing all the stuff you want and getting the grades you need, which is what most people did anyway. The soul stars who are spamming get good and skill issue kind of represent the nerdy kids that were always listening the teachers and were bragging about their grades to everyone else, as if that makes them better in any way. But obviously these kinds of people are busy both as children and as grown-ups. They need to keep doing what their parents or bosses are ordering them to, so they can't possibly be spending tons of hours playing the Souls games and bragging about them online. To me, it seems more like they are the children that had terrible grades and a terrible social life, and they were known as the clowns of the class. They didn't have the intelligence to understand the difference between education and parroting, but they were also lacking the attention span and memory to memorize the books and parrot them to get the good grades. So they kind of had the worst of both worlds, but after growing up and becoming teenagers or adults, their brains finally developed enough so they can finally do the basic task of memorization their teachers were asking them to to do when they were toddlers, and now they think they are the cool kids and they get to brag about beating the game just like the nerdy teacher pets were bragging about their grades in school.
These games aren't made for everyone, and if they're not for you, that's fine. If you're not having fun, why bother? Find your joy, my dude. Let's take a look at the next option in how we deal with cognitive dissonance. I justify the belief or behavior by adding new beliefs. So, in this example, I have the belief that I am good at Souls games. I have the behavior, which is that I died 20 times in a row. And now I add a new belief, which is I'm not strong enough. I need to level up, or I need more tools or scatter tree fragments to deal with this. Elden Ring is an RPG, not a character action game. In something like the Batman Arkham games or Spider-Man, those games make you feel like a superhero. In God of War, you feel like an actual god. They do this by making combat fairly intuitive, and most bosses usually are beaten on the first attempt to keep the story chugging along and keep you feeling strong. In Elden Ring, you are a bug. You are a little bubba baby that gets killed in 2 hits by the first enemy that you see, and then another 2 hits by the second enemy that you see. And then you see some little knights, and you kill them, and you feel like you're making progress, and you're becoming a big boy, but then you meet Margit, and he kills you in 2 hits. You are a little dribble of meat, and your job is to kill mad gods. That is the Lovecraftian horror of these games. But if you persist, the daunting challenge becomes more and more manageable until eventually you are enough. You do not start Elden Ring as the Elden Lord. You start it as Tarnished. Tarnished, not the Tarnished. You're just some dude named Butthole. The same in Dark Souls. You're not the chosen undead. You're just an undead. You become chosen, either by leveling up and getting the tools and resources needed to defeat the challenges ahead of you, or by learning the bosses so well that you can reliably dodge everything they have to throw at you. But the issue with these styles of play is that they're heavily influenced by how much or how little you interact with the open world. The player who wants to feel as strong as possible may be incredibly disappointed when they are destroyed by Rolana because they haven't picked up enough scatter tree fragments. It is really worth having a mindset that is clear on how you like to play the game. If this is a role-playing game, what role do you want to play?
Okay, so calling this an RPG is a massive stretch. Just because it has levels and stats doesn't make it automatically a role-playing game. There aren't any real roles to be played. A tank is not a role that just has more health than others. It needs an entire playstyle with many skills that allow it to do the tanking. And we are talking about a game that not only everyone has the exact same dodge rolling playstyle, but everyone has the same stats as well. The stats are hard capped, so everyone has 40 to 60 vigor and stamina, and the one stat that helps them make damage depends on the level, of course. There is no variety in stats or playstyles, and since the problem is the very core combat, it doesn't matter how stronger I become, how weaker the enemies become, what I'm wearing, what I'm summoning, the game is still pointlessly boring. You are not really creating your own challenge, you are just tempering the health and damage, and you are doing that by grinding mindlessly for entire hours, when you can just use a mod and make everything as easy or as hard as you want instantly, or just straight up use a cheat engine.
There's a meme going around at the moment of someone saying,
It's supposed to be a fucking RPG. What role am I playing? The fucking victim?
and when I heard that, I thought that is a perfect way to describe the series of games. But then I realized it was meant as a criticism. People have vastly different expectations of what this game is to them. So it's important to clarify for yourself how to make that work for you. How much damage do you want to do to a boss? How much damage do you want them to do to you? How important is feeling strong? How much do you want to struggle? There are so many comments on the Elden Ring wiki stating things like, this boss would be so much better if it didn't have so much health, or this boss would be so much better if it had more. The subjective experience of how strong players are when they reach certain bosses makes a huge impact on their experience. This is the downside of a game that offers such varying experiences within the same difficulty setup. You are going to have to make peace with that. If you feel too weak, get stronger. You can't expect the game to scale everything to how you specifically want the game to be when there is this much variety. In the DLC, the Scattertree fragments are the obvious answer to increase your level of power. They have been criticized a lot as bringing artificial difficulty, and I just don't get it.
Well, since you don't understand what artificial difficulty means, let me explain it to you in the most simple terms. Let's say you have a simple platformer like Mario, 2D. You can only move and jump. In the first level, you fight a few Goombas, and once you clear it, the second level is a boss. The boss is just another Goomba, but it doesn't even move, so it can't even kill you unless you walk directly to its face. How you beat the boss? You need to jump on top of its head 1,000,000 times. But don't worry, the game is also an RPG. Instead of playing the second stage with the boss, you can replay the first stage as many times as you want before moving on to the boss, and every time you kill a Goomba, you get 1 experience point. After reaching 1,000,000 experience points, you level up, and now your jumps can do double damage, which means you only need 500,000 jumps to kill the boss. You have options to make the game way easier. You can keep leveling up. Isn't that wonderful? If you genuinely think that kind of video game is a good idea, then you've got to be smoking some really good crack before playing video games.
If you get to a tough boss in the base game, or any of the Souls games for that matter, and you are significantly underleveled, you're gonna have a tough time. This is the same as in any RPG. If you're too weak, you're going to need to get stronger. We learnt this in Final Fantasy. This is nothing new. I don't know why this is such an unreasonable ask. The same with defensives. If you feel like enemies deal too much damage, you can do something about that. You have that ability. You just need to mess around with these, and maybe take advantage of these. There are so many people out there who have subscribed to the belief that this game is scaled for you to use every tool, and if you don't, then you are making the game unreasonably hard for yourself. Ignore these people. If you can't beat a boss, it's not because you didn't summon. You can summon, and it will definitely help you, but it's not necessary. You don't need to summon the Mimic TM if you don't want to.
No shit.
Sometimes you do need to resist the urge to make yourself stronger if you want to retain a challenge, and that takes willpower. The third option is the classic case, the stereotype for gamer rage. I can outright deny the conflict between my belief and the behavior. In this case, I deny that my deaths had anything to do with my ability. Whether or not I am good at the game is irrelevant, because those deaths are not my fault.
Nice catch, Mario.
Couldn't see ya. The sun was in my eyes.
I was not.
It's the sun was in my eyes argument. It's the ref made a bad call. It's the game lagged. That character is OP. Or the most common Elden Ring complaint, that damage was unavoidable. It's important to stress that sometimes the sun was in your eyes. Sometimes the game does lag, and yes, sometimes glitches do happen in Elden Ring and something hits you that probably shouldn't have. But if you do recognize that you are the kind of person that often leaps to this line of thinking, I think you'll find that this happens less than you think it does. Again, there are no judgments for who you are as a person if this is your most common way of dealing with cognitive dissonance. Studies have shown that we are genetically disposed to deal with our emotions in certain ways, but it can be helpful to bring awareness to it and see if you can shift your way of thinking to allow yourself more control, because this line of thinking is death. In this game, in every game, and in daily life, this is losing the mental game. Once you relinquish control, you accept defeat. In competitive games, this is known as tilt. You're thinking too much about the odds that are stacked against you and ignoring what you can do about it. That may help ease the symptoms of hurt pride, but it completely removes your ability to control your situation. Now ask yourself, what is more important? At times like this, focus inward. What can you do? And be honest with yourself. If you truly feel that there's nothing you could have done differently, watch some footage of yourself and see if that's actually true. Often, you can't see your options in the moment, but you can see them clear as day once you watch it back. A lot of this has to do with recency bias. You remember the thing that killed you, but not all the things that led up to that point that you could have done differently. Maybe you took too many risky hit trades and ran out of healing flasks. Maybe you could have taken better advantage of punish windows and done more damage than you did. That could have meant the boss died much earlier than you did. There's always things that you can do to improve. Consider the problem that you're having. Think about it holistically. Examine it from every angle and see if you can find a way in. Is the problem that you feel the boss is overtuned or OP? Well, see the earlier example. Do something about your power level and even the playing field. Is the problem that you feel you have no opportunities to heal? Well, maybe the problem is that the times that you're using to heal aren't the safest options. If you feel the boss has no punish windows, is that actually true? What are you punishing with and when? Try another option at another time. See if that makes a difference. If you feel the boss has crazy long combos and all you can do is just wait until they're done, is that true? Can you get damage in between the combos? Are there attacks you can strafe to get massive damage while they're swinging? This isn't a turn-based game. If a boss lifts his weapon for a quarter century before bringing it down, hit him. Don't focus on what the boss can do that you can't. Focus on what you can do. Once we recognize that we have more control than we think we do, we allow ourselves the ability to deal with the problem of cognitive dissonance in a productive way. So let's talk about the last option in dealing with our frustration that can give us more control without changing our build or getting stronger.
Okay, so the third option is being in denial about the reality in front of your very eyes. People who mistakenly thought they were good at a game can't cope with the fact that they are not as good as they thought, and they need to make a bunch of fake excuses so they can keep their ego. Here's the problem in my case. The moment I understood the game is meant to be brute forced through trial and error, death itself became acceptable because it's literally an unavoidable part of the game. You are meant to die and learn from your deaths. Memorize what killed you and keep memorizing until you find the way to win. The problem is not the deaths themselves, it's the massive amount of time that is being wasted with every death, even though it should be minimalized since it's very expected, and even then the entire process is a waste of time. When I'm playing a real-time strategy game online against the best players, I am fully aware I'm going to lose. I'm still trying to win and I'm trying more than usual just to see how far I can go, but I still lose. And it's all very acceptable because I had tons of fun. I learned many new things. I know how to do better the next time and my strategic skills have increased. One game is stimulating your brain, making you think about strategies, be creative, original, think outside of the box, and the other game is just using your memory. This kind of advice he gives might be useful for idiots who have low impulse control and keep raging at video games, giving them up, telling to themselves they will never come back again and still come back the next day. But this advice has no actual use for people with a brain. Does he seriously think smart people would not be able to realize all of that by themselves?
Justify the behavior by changing my perception of the belief. So, in this example, it's not that I'm not good at this game. It's that I'm not good at this boss. Yet. I need practice. This, for me, is the healthiest and most productive way to deal with frustration in video games. You're putting the focus inward. When I started the DLC, I got destroyed. But that's just because I'd never played it. I didn't know what the bosses did, or even who they were. I died over and over again, just like you did. There are new boss mechanics and systems that need to be learned and strategized around. This is, I think, what people intend to mean when they say things like get good or skill issue. But saying it like that is reductive and unhelpful. If you have gotten to the DLC, you are good. You have gotten good. But even if you're the best Elden Ring player in the world, when you get to the final boss, you're gonna die a whole bunch. Because he's got new moves, and you don't know what they do. There is a reason that when we talk about the gameplay loop in this game, we use different terms than we do with FPS games or fighting games. We don't talk about improving reaction time or frame data. We talk about learning move sets. Learning. It's not a skill issue, it's a knowledge issue.
Well, yeah, that's the problem. It's not a skill-based game, it's a knowledge-based game. There are no skills to be carried on to the next fights. Saying skill issue is the fastest way to out yourself as an idiot. It means you don't understand what kind of game you are playing. These idiots don't understand the difference between skill and knowledge. They don't even understand what intelligence is. They think knowing some pointless pieces of trivia equals intelligence, because they clearly don't have any. The fact they thought they are good at a game and they are going to keep defeating bosses when they don't know the first thing about them speaks volumes about their intelligence.
One very helpful thing in this learning process is identifying your habits. If you have a habit of rolling left on an attack, a fight is going to be incredibly difficult if the easiest option is to roll right. Identifying your own habits and what it is that is actually getting you killed is going to really give you an advantage in learning what you can do differently. This has nothing to do with reflexes, it's just changing the direction in which you lean the analog stick. It has nothing to do with how good you are at video games, it has everything to do with how you are able to adapt. Some attacks are fine if you strafe them. Some attacks are fine to jump instead of roll and may give you an additional punish. You may never learn that if you are stuck in the habit of doing the same thing every time. It can turn a difficult fight into an impossible one. If you feel like something is undodgeable, try rolling forward, or left, or right. Try every other possible option, because it may be a habit of yours that is making the boss particularly difficult. There is one more thing that can help assist in your learning process, and this is a controversial topic. I don't know why this is a controversial topic, but it is, so here we go. When you go into these catacombs, and you walk down this hallway, and this little critter jumps out and shanks you in the neck, there are two ways that you can be warned in advance that he is there. One, you've died to him already. That's trial and error. Or two, you've seen this little message on the floor that says danger ahead. That's community engagement. These games are built on community engagement. It's why so much of this game is so vague. It's why channels like Vidya can still make regular 1-hour video essays on the lore of this game, but we still have absolutely no idea why Marika shattered the Elden Ring. You probably looked up a guide or had a friend tell you how to get into this area here. This is nothing new. This extends all the way back to Demon Souls or Dark Souls. These games are deliberately obtuse, and this extends to the boss design. If you have absolutely no idea how to dodge a boss's attack, there is nothing wrong with looking at a guide or watching a no-hit run. You don't have to, and there is real joy in making those discoveries for yourself, but it does take more time. In the same way that looking up a guide may save you the trouble of whacking every single solid surface in a room to look for a hidden door. That's just how these games work. You can do it without looking up a guide, but that means you need to do it yourself. And learning takes time and energy.
So he admits these games were made with lots of online help in mind, just so you can skip the core mechanics of trial and error, but they are still somehow considered peak difficulty, because that makes so much sense, right? By that logic, you can just see a guide that makes your character broken, shows you every single bullshit or trap and how to deal with it, shows you every cheese for a boss, and then you have become the best player instantly. If online help is part of the game as well, you might as well go all out, because at the end of the day, you will waste less time. What's the point of making a game based on trial and error and then telling the players to seek online help, which contradicts the core gameplay, and it's also a contradiction to the feeling that you get after beating the challenges. So not only does it go against the game's core mechanics, it also goes against the game's very philosophy.
You need time to develop good habits and eliminate bad ones. Let it happen slowly. And celebrate those little victories of successfully getting a good punish or stopping yourself doing something that's killed you 1,000 times. The more you can pump those good chemicals into your brain when you do something that should be rewarded, the more you are conditioning yourself for the behavior that you want repeated. But more than anything, enjoy that process. Relish the feeling you get when you reach a new milestone or improve.
Once again, there is nothing enjoyable or rewarding about that process or even the results. All I feel afterwards is having my time wasted, having gained nothing, making progress in a brain-dead game just to see what brain-dead boss is going to come afterwards cannot be possibly enjoyable by someone who's seeking stimulation and actual challenges.
Treat the game as a sport that you are training for. Treat it like lifting in the gym and love that feeling of lifting a little more weight each week and improving your personal best. Because it's that enjoyment that will fuel your motivation, far more than victory will.
And this is by far the dumbest thing he says in the video. If lifting weights was only useful so you can lift the exact same weights in the exact same way at the exact same amount, then this comparison would be accurate. You don't work out just so you can work out slightly better the next time. You work out because you gain a lot of things from it, like being healthier, stronger, having more energy, looking better, removing toxins, gaining new fighting skills and techniques. There are tons of things in life that require physical skills. In what world did you think this was a normal comparison? If Souls players are treating memorization of animations they see on a screen as if it's some kind of workout, can you really blame me for calling them basement dwellers? Cause they clearly don't understand the first thing about working out, just like they don't understand what these games are all about. They suck both mentally and physically.
There is a common perception that the process of defeating a boss is endless, masochistic suffering and constant death until you get that one good run and you finally get the good feeling. You can enjoy the process of constant death too. Learning doesn't have to be painful. There are resources that can assist or speed up that process, but even if you don't use them, you can do it without frustration and enjoy that process. The one thing, above all, that I recommend to anyone that wants to become less frustrated and even enjoy extreme difficulty is to play to improve, not to win. That goes for any game, that goes for any challenge. Try not to say, I can't do this, and instead say, I can't do this yet, because you will, and it will feel so fucking good when you do.
So, this right here is the problem with the Souls fandom. The problem is not the idiots who keep spamming get good and skill issue. And those aren't even much of a minority either. There is plenty of them. But the biggest problem is this guy right here. He essentially did an entire huge video doing tons of mental gymnastics, and all of it is just a glorified get good comment. In a game with no skill ceiling, you are not getting better. You are just just getting closer to the goal through trial and error memorization. And the fact that you think everyone will feel good after learning all of the patterns, animations and pretty much every bullshit the game can throw at you makes you completely delusional and out of touch. You are projecting your own feelings to others, and you are not trying to understand different perspectives of people who don't share your desperation for accomplishments. All these comments and videos who are trying to stretch the two words of get good as much as possible are not helping with the toxicity of the fandom, and they are not making them any less obnoxious either. It's the opposite. They are reinforcing them and enabling them, making them feel as if they are actually correct when they keep spamming the same bullshit. Good thing reality has a way of slapping them in their face, and they will be treated the exact way they deserve once they finally decide to leave their mother's basement.